As I stayed in Baghdad, I saw my city, the city in which I was born and raised, through eventful years, starting with the war with Iran and ending with the fall of Baghdad. I saw my city wailing under vicious bombardment, its skies full of missiles, being destroyed, burned, looted, violated in all its being, details, history, and structure. And I saw it become a city of ghosts, thieves, and robbers. In this book, I documented all of the details which represent the most atrocious events in the modern history of Baghdad, and I do not believe it will have an equal. I documented the looting of its museums, burning of its libraries, and desecrating of its history. This was a paragraph from the description by Iraqi artist Karim Rissan of his book, The Baghdad Burning, that he created in 2003. Now, the war in Iraq has been a very long war. Well, wars in Iraq have been, in fact, a hallmark of its contemporary age, starting with the Iran Iraq War and then a decade of debilitating sanctions by the US and allies, and ending in the 2003, and of course the Gulf Wars, and then ending in the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. For Iraqi artists specifically, this has been extremely disabling. So, through the sanctions, they were locked into the country with no view of the outside. There is no travel, there is no magazines coming in, no journals, but also there is no material for them to work. So it is an extremely stifling situation, which was sort of under the guise of the war on terror, which sort of disabled the trajectory and the continuity of historiography, the history of art in the country Iraq, which has been known for its mature and well-developed movement of modern art during the mid 20th century. So the contemporary artists, and particularly a generation known as the 80s generation, who basically came to their maturity in art under the circumstances of the wars and sanctions, are the ones to which Karim Rissan, the artist that I just quoted, belongs to. Karim stayed in Iraq for the most part, as many of his generation, because of the lack of the ability to travel, but because also of the lack of the ability to have material, as it was part of the sanction mandate, they would find material to use themselves in creating works. And that what sort of gave prominence to a trend that became known as dafatar, plural Arabic word plural for daftar, which means notebook, and this is sort of the equivalent of an artist book, let's say. Interesting about these books is that they are created from found material, whatever is available. Clearly, size would make it possible for them to create, because, as we know, that wars and these circumstances don't really stifle creativity. They might try to delay it. But so under this sort of very confused, completely opaque existence within a country that has been very open and very connected, the artists had no other retort than to look inside, look at their museums, look at their own heritage and history. It manifested in the various documentations of Dafatar that the artists were creating. As well as a style developed by artist Hana Malallah, a contemporary of Karim Rissan and a colleague, a classmate of his, that she called ruination technique. A technique that she argues is sort of, not only stems, but is very representative of the reality that they were living in, that it carries historical narration that transformed a historically recognized and celebrated development of art history into destruction. Now, it is also this sort of connection with the museums that Karim Rissan and Hana Malala and their colleague had, which was denied for them in 2003 as well. I went to Baghdad in June 2003, straight sort of a couple of months after the invasion and destruction, to find a country that has fully lost its luster as I had left it in 1980 to come to the US as a student to study. Not only that it had lost its luster, but people have lost hope. They had no idea how they're going to be moving forward, and artists included. There was no electricity, which continues to be a problem. There is no place for them in the international scene of art development. Even after 2003, and with the sort of quick turnover with internet connections and possibilities of connecting to other places, they really felt left out. Artist Hannah Malala often asked me, what about us? Where do we fit? Other artists of her generation asked the same question, as those other artists like Adel Abdin and Wafa Bilal, who left in the 90s and before and were able to find their place in the other parts of the world, whether here in the US or in Europe, were able to speak the same language of the global contemporary that the Iraqi artists felt completely absent from. The way that their vision was developing was completely in a cocoon, completely related to their own past, but also to their understanding of where or who's against them, who's their friend, who's their enemy. Media, right after 2003, was amazed to not find work of dissent or resistance against Saddam Hussein, which, of course, clearly misses the point of living under the dictatorship and wanting to survive. So, simple aspect of life survival is what the artists were working with, but also the reality that for Iraqi artists living in Iraq, making good art, creativity is their way of resistance. Now that takes me back to this format of dafatar, which in a way we can think about it stemming from traditional Islamic representation of manuscripts. Except these, of course, are about the secular, the mundane, and very open, very creative. They don't follow any format in any shape or form, but they became the sites of existence, the sites of resistance, but also the sites of witnessing, of documenting, of telling the story of what was happening in Iraq. Some of those dafatars found their way out of the country early on and are in major museums, but the reality is this format of articulating existence and development artistically as well as just as human beings have not really been understood largely, despite of the latest sort of representation as part of the MoMA PS1 exhibition, Theater of Operations, about the Gulf Wars. They are not understood for the value of what they represent for the artists themselves and their ability to survive, their ability to continue their creativity. What they do tell us is how artists, as well as other inhabitants of the city of Baghdad or other places, dealt with the situation of the continuous war and destruction of their country. And it's really sad that we are not using them more to understand the situation. Is while we don't really know where the war of terror has gotten to, the Gulf War has become part of our history. The U.S. invasion is mission accomplished by many, but the reality is, many of those artists that I just mentioned, Karim Rissan, Hana Malala, they had to leave the country because their lives became threatened because of us on the outside trying to understand their art and bring it out. These dafatar thus tell us much of the missed story of what had happened in Iraq under the war, which is not resolved by any shape or form, that is affecting what is happening in Iraq at the moment as we speak, but also the history of Iraqi art and its production and trajectory. Where is Iraqi art is as confusing as any other question that one would ask today. Is it inside of Iraq, which is completely still disconnected from its own history because the destruction of museum erased that part, and it's not really speaking on the same level of where the rest of the artists have been in the world, but also the sort of the diaspora Iraqi artists who have access to many other possibilities. I thus, really would love to see the Fatir as something that is more explored for us to understand this opacity of war and its disconnect, this sort of, cocoon that a part of history of the Iraqi art trajectory has been set in. Thank you.